There we go. Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for attending this evening. My name is Sarah, and I will be facilitating the conversation today. As you are watching live via YouTube, please feel free to ask any questions in the chat, and hopefully we will be able to answer some of them at the end of the presentation. We are joined by two presenters today who I'll introduce in just a second. And they will be answering the Q&As that you provided in the registration for this event, and that will be towards the end of the presentation. Today's video will be recorded and it will be saved on Peterborough Public Health's YouTube channel. It will also be on the RAT webpage of Peterborough Public Health, and all of that will be linked at the end of the presentation. So I'm going to start with a land acknowledgement. I am meeting with you virtually today from Ngojuwanong or Peterborough, Ontario, and I respectfully acknowledge that I am on the Treaty 20 and traditional territory of the Mississauga and Anishinaabeg nations. We offer our gratitude to the First Nations and for their care and teachings about our earth and our relations. May we honor those teachings. Now to move on to our speakers, we're so happy to be joined today by Dr. Sarah Jamieson. Dr. Jamieson is an assistant professor in the biology department at Trent University, and her research focuses on urban ecology in Peterborough. This summer, she and her students are researching scavenger behavior, nesting habits of robins, and how gardening may influence moth populations. We're also joined by Matt Faris today. Matt is a health inspector with Peterborough Public Health and has been with us since 2012. He's currently working as a senior inspector with areas of focus on food safety, rabies prevention, recreational water, drinking water, and health hazards. So we're going to start off with Sarah's presentation. Take it away.
Okay, hi everyone. Thanks for joining us. So today basically I'm going to talk more about the ecology of rats and give you some background on rats themselves. And then once I finish up, Matt's going to take over and talk more on the health things that people might want to be considering. Okay. Sorry, just a little tech glitch. Okay, so now it works. Sorry guys, it's just gotten really small. Sarah, are you going to be able to just forward it for me?
Absolutely.
Okay. Stop. No. Okay. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so we're going to talk about brown rats. You also call them Norway rats. You'll hear all sorts of descriptions, but brown rats or Norway rats are kind of the most common ones. So they're not actually from Norway. Their native range is China and Mongolia, and so they came over from there. Could you click? And basically, they really started traveling with the global trade. So once they colonized Europe in the 1500s, and then once they hit there, they basically traveled with all the European exploration. So they hit North America in the 1750s. Now they're pretty much found throughout North America, except some of the really, like northern Alaska and some of the islands up in our Arctic, except Alberta. So Alberta hasn't had a population since the 1950s, and that's basically been they put in a massive effort into controlling the populations. They're relatively large compared to your average little rodent. So from tip to tail, they're about 40 centimeters, so just over a foot and a bit, and they can be generally between 200 up to 400 grams. So just approaching the 1 pound hit. In the wild, they live about a year, right? So, again, it kind of depends on a lot of factors, but years kind of average. Okay, next slide, Sarah. Okay, so females, they can start breeding at 2 months of age, right? So generally in the wild, it's thought it's more around 3 months, but still, it's really, really young, okay? They have, their first litter tends to be smaller than the average litter, so the first litter tends to be around 6 pups, and then after that, it's 8 pups per litter. The thing is, though, they can also have up to 6 litters a year. So that's, on average, the one female here, when she starts breeding at 2 months of age, she can produce up to 46 offspring. Now, you might have seen this figure going around, the one that just came up, and it talks about how within 3 years, if you have 2 rats, you can have up to almost 500 million. That is mathematically correct, but ecologically, there's so many factors that would prevent that from happening, right? Particularly density dependent things like, basically they'd start fighting, there'd be competition for food, cannibalism at that stage, so all sorts of things. So that would really be, ideal conditions with no predation, limited disease, all that kind of thing. So while mathematically it works out, it's not kind of ecologically of concern. All right, Sarah? Movement-wise, so it's a little bit tough. So generally, they stay within 200 meters, okay? So there's been a lot of research that's happened in Vancouver. They have the Vancouver Rat Project there, and they've followed them. So 200 meters is not actually that much. So this little figure that I have here, that little mouse is sitting on City Hall, and that shows you what 200 meters around City Hall is, okay? So it's not that far. And then things like streets actually act as barriers. So while rats, obviously can run across the street, they don't like to, right? So if they have everything that they need within their block, so they don't have to travel across streets, they generally won't. Okay, so which is why maybe, neighbors across the street from you might be having a rat problem and yet you don't see them because the rats just don't really want to be crossing those streets. Once you have a really dense colony, they actually move less, partially because, they have everything that they need there. And also there might be competition between colonies. One big thing is, so also they're primarily nocturnal. So the majority of their activities happen before midnight. So it's not just nocturnal, it's kind of like early bird nocturnal. So really it's, dusk to midnight is their main time of activity. And then after that, it kind of gets less and less visible. That is saying, though, if it's a female who's lactating, so producing milk and, has a whole bunch of pups to be caring for, you might see her during the day because basically it's the same as raccoons and skunks. If they're caring for young, they just have to eat, regardless of what time of day it is. So those of you that are parents out there, I'm sure, you've had many middle of the night feeds, so same deal there, except it's middle of the day feeds. Okay, next. Densities, well, it really depends. So it depends on the location. So sometimes the density can remain fairly constant throughout the year, but if you do get peaks, it's generally late summer, early fall. And that's really where we're getting a lot of juveniles starting to move around, and also a lot of like high juvenile survivorship, right? Because it is kind of a good period of time and you'll have a lot of offspring surviving compared to, say, winter breeding, okay? Now, this was a study that was conducted in New York City, and they found that densities were positive related to green spaces, so being near parks or just even like, little center parts of cul-de-sacs, things like that can boost rat numbers. And that's partially because it kind of provides a good soil for them to be burrowing around in and having their little colonies. Also, density of restaurants, basically that just provides access to food, okay? Older houses and vacant housing can also lead to higher numbers. And, Matt's going to get into this as well, but those types of homes, basically often they have easy ways of access for the rats. And once the rats kind of get in there, they settle, right? So especially in a vacant home, they settle and nobody's going to bother them. Also, areas with high density or lower income residences also tend to have more rats. And again, I often hear people like, oh, my neighbor just took down his shed and now we have rats everywhere. And it's like, well, that's because it was a nice quiet place for them to burrow under and basically chill out. And then when you have residential attractions, so this was more of a look, like the New York study was more of like a neighborhood type study. Residential attractions, compost, of course, does provide some food resources for rats, so that will lead to them. Water features, so having your little backyard pond or even fountains or bird feeders that are low to the ground, right? Everybody needs food, water, and shelter. So that's, they're providing that. And also feeding of wildlife and or cats, right? So cat colonies and such. So feeding birds, cats, raccoons, whatever. Anytime you're putting food out into the landscape, there's a chance you're bringing in rats or providing for rats. Okay, next. So that being said, in urban cities, right, you often have increased body condition of rats, right? So that can lead to increased reproductive rates and or increased survival, right? So they'll have more babies and they're likely to survive longer. And so that ultimately can lead to increased densities. And the thing is, once you have an increased density, right, there's only so high a density can get before aggressive interactions start occurring, right? So when you have high densities, it's not just that they're next to each other and they're able to share germs. They actually start getting more aggressive, and these aggressive interactions, if you have one sick or carrier individual in that colony, it'll be more likely to spread it because they're, aggressively interacting, scratching, biting, all that kind of stuff. Okay, and then I think that the key here, and I think if you hit the button again there, Sarah, is the keyword is can, right? So these are it's not a guarantee that will all lead that way, but it's a can kind of thing. Okay. So we often hear, Peterborough's infested with rats and all that kind of stuff. And, I do occasionally see rats, but I definitely wouldn't call it infested. So, there are data out there of, how many calls professional pest controllers get. We're not high on that list at all, okay? And then so my research involves using camera traps. So basically like they're little cameras that we put out into the environment. Sometimes we bait them, sometimes we don't. And basically the camera takes a picture whenever it sees movement, okay? So I had my urban ecology class, so it's a 4th year biology class. They were pretty much scattered throughout Peterborough, and they all took home one of my cameras for the week. And they all set it up in their backyard, and halfway through they baited it with an apple, and the other half it was unbaited. So we had 25 cameras placed in September, and we had 284 pictures taken and 0 rats. And I thought this was really good because, some of my other research, it kind of ends up selecting certain people and all this kind of stuff. But this was really a nice wide swatch of Peterborough, and we had no rats. So that was great. One of the other studies that I'm leading is with a master's student, Emma Byers, and we're looking at window strikes. So when birds hit windows and they die, we're looking at what kind of species might be scavenging those. So our research involves taking birds that are already dead. We got them through the Kawartha Wildlife Center, and we place them under windows and leave them for a week with these cameras focused on them. And out of these 136 species or bird carcasses out there, only 2 were scavenged by rats. So again, not much evidence for being infested. And then we also had a lot of photos of species that didn't actually scavenge the birds. So we had 270 non-scavenging events, and only 3 of those were rats. So again, we would have expected a lot more if we were infested. And this is, again, pretty widespread throughout. We have down south end, north end, East City, all that kind of stuff. So we're fairly geographically covered. So I would say, no, we're not infested, but that doesn't mean that they're not problem areas, right? Because as I said, they don't move much. So you could have a block that you might want to use the term infested, but generally the town itself, no. Okay, Sarah? Okay, so other comments that I've had, just a couple of years ago, Peterborough enacted the roaming cat bylaw, which makes it illegal to have your cat roaming off your property. So basically everybody's supposed to be either keeping their cats inside or keeping them on a leash. So similar, what we should be doing with our dogs. And so people thought that maybe by enacting this bylaw, we're removing some predators from the landscape, which is, leading to a boost in rat numbers. So Do cats eat rats? Well, yeah, sure they do. Of course they do, right? But relatively small numbers. So there was a study done in Baltimore, and they found that less than 7% of cat scats, so cat, fecal samples, contained evidence of rats. All right, so that's really actually quite low. And then they found in suburban areas, it was anywhere between 75 and 80, or 75 and 100% of the scat actually included native species. So this, to me, definitely presents evidence that the cat bylaw was a good thing. Also, when the cats are preying upon rats, they tend to be going after the young ones, right? For a lot of different reasons, they're probably more easily accessed by these cats. And these are the non-breeders, right? So they're not the ones we need to be taking out. We need to be taking out the breeders, okay? So my conclusion is it's very unlikely that the cat bylaw had any effect on rat populations. Okay, Sarah? Okay. And, there's also a lot of discussion about our new composting or green bin initiative, which I'm pretty excited about. So do rats eat compost? Well, yes, of course they do. It's free food, right? And, often it's the meal we just had. So it's, nice and fresh and delicious and cooked. But generally composters don't cause a rat infestation, okay? They definitely, they do feed on it. So this little picture here, at the base of that one, you could see a little burrow that the rat has done. But when you look at the research, it doesn't suggest that it is a big factor. So there was a study done by an honors student up in Laurentian University, and she found that, so she basically ended up sampling all these different households that whether or not they compost or they don't compost, whether or not they've been seeing rats and or haven't been. And she found that the houses that did compost, only 33% of them reported that they had seen rats. And that was compared to 49% of the respondents who don't compost. So 49% of the people who don't compost had commented that they do see rats, right? So, good evidence there. And then there was an Austrian study that looked at green bin programs, and they actually found that they did indeed actually reduce the numbers, right? So yes, we will be composting, but they're going to be contained in containers. People will not be putting, hopefully, the compost out in their garbage bags, which would be more easily accessed, right? Also, for those of us like myself who compost just for the fact I want to be keeping it out of the landfill, this is great because I will no longer need to be storing compost in my garden. I'll be putting it in these green bins and having it picked up regularly. Okay, next. So that's it for me, and leading into the public health side of things for Matt. What did people say when they caught the Black Plague? Go ahead, Sarah.
Oh, rat.
All right, so I'll be sticking around. So if anybody has any ecology type questions, I'll be here as well. So I'll leave it to you, Matt.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jamieson. I will hand it over to Matt Faris.
Thank you. Okay, trying to go through the slides. Can anybody? Okay, that seems to be working. Okay, so yeah, my name's Matt Faris. I'm a health inspector with Peterborough Public Health. I'm here to go through my part of the presentation. So rats, concerns and controls. For the agenda, I'm going to review kind of common concerns associated with rats, things that you can do to prevent and control an issue, and the role of Peterborough Public Health when it comes to rat and rodent issues. And just a quick disclaimer that this presentation is meant to provide general information, practical solutions to prevent, control rat issues. It's not intended to function as legal advice for any specific ongoing legal disputes. Had to say that. Okay, so health concerns. Zooming out, looking at what is the health concern. Any kind of disease that's spread from an animal to a human is called a zoonotic disease. This is not a new thing that people have been dealing with. It's been something that us humans have been dealing with for the past 12,000 years, ever since we started farming and living in permanent settlements. How many diseases come from animals? It's estimated roughly 60% of all known infectious diseases, and up to 75% of all new and emerging infectious diseases find their origin in animals. It's not just rats, mosquitoes, fleas, ticks, bats, mice, birds, cats, dogs. They can all spread disease. Rats were implicated in the biggest, most deadly pandemic of all time, which was the bubonic plague, the Black Death. It wiped out half of Europe. And this was due to a flea that was carried on the rats, and the flea was able to deliver bites to people and deliver bacteria to people through those bites. So is plague something that we need to be worried about in Ontario? No, it's really not. So it's been a reportable disease since about 1930. The last reported case in Ontario was 1939. Leptospirosis. This is a bacterial disease that's spread through the urine of infected animals, including rats, and it most typically spreads through water. And a common way to get ill with this bacteria is to go swimming in polluted water or go swimming after very heavy rains. Wasn't able to find specific stats on this one. It's not a reportable disease in Ontario, but all I could find is that human cases in Canada, period, are very rare. However, we do know this bacteria exists in Ontario, southern Ontario specifically, and we're seeing cases go up in dogs. Hantavirus is a viral disease spread through dried urine, feces, saliva of rodents, specifically deer mice. And this can get into your lungs when you're cleaning up a mess. Very serious illness. Are you likely to get this in Ontario? It's been reportable since 2001, and there hasn't been any reported cases. There will be a first one at some point, but just the chances aren't overwhelming. And then salmonellosis, so salmonella bacteria that we normally think of chicken, we normally think of food, but a lot of different animals carry this bacteria in their gut. And so if a rat finds its way into your food supply, leaves behind some of its feces that contains salmonella, it can create salmonellosis in yourself, lots of diarrhea, lots of feeling awful. So in addition to being able to spread disease, rats are also quite destructive if they get to high numbers. So is this the point in the presentation where everybody should be panicking? No, I'm having a hard time here moving the slides forward. Sarah, I might need you to take over the slideshow.
Can do.
Awesome. And if you could go back a couple of slides. Perfect. Okay, so next slide. This is not the point in the presentation where you need to panic, even though I just panicked due to technical difficulties. We don't need to panic about seeing a rat outside. There's very clear steps that you can take. So what you want to do is, one, you want to confirm, is it actually a rat issue that you're having? Next, you want to clean up any kind of mess that they've made. After that, you want to remove what's attracting them. So clutter, food, water sources. Then you want to block them out of your home or your business. And finally, contact licensed pest control. So first of all, looking at evidence. Okay, so we have rat droppings down there. They can be quite big. They tend to be have blunt ends. So with a mouse dropping, pointy ends, but rat droppings can be big. They can be up to 2 centimeters long for a full-grown big rat. So big, noticeable droppings. Next thing you might see, burrows. And these burrows do look somewhat similar, like to a chipmunk burrow. These burrows are usually 2 to 3 inches in diameter at the opening. They're usually 1 to 2 feet underground, but they can go much, much deeper. And depending on how many rats there are, they can start building burrows on top of each other. It can create very unstable land. So that's something that we're very concerned with. Evidence gnaw marks. So you're seeing parallel tooth marks, usually about 3 millimeters long. If it's very clear there, the next picture is not quite so clear. So harder to tell what it is in wood, but this would be signs of some kind of likely rodent issue. And then this one, smudge marks. So if you've ever seen, if you suspect rats and you see very dark brown kind of area, it could be what's referred to as a smudge mark, which is a high traffic area for rodents. They're running through this path over and over and over again, and this is just buildup from the grease on their coats that's being left behind. You might even see, if you have a rat issue in your backyard, you might be able to see a trail of grass that's no longer existent, where rats are going from their burrow to the food to the burrow, back and forth. And then, of course, if you see a rat, so seeing one rat, it's not indicative of there being an issue. But if you're seeing a bunch of rats, especially during the day, that's indicative of there's a lot of rats in the area, and we obviously want to take action. So you've confirmed that there is an issue. You've found, say, a nest, or you've set up a snap trap and you've caught a rat. You find droppings. We want to treat any rodent mess as if it were infectious. So we want to use the wet method to clean it up, which is basically spraying the rat down, if it's a dead rat, nest, droppings, urine, whatever it is, spraying it down. Household disinfectant would work. You could even use like a teaspoon of chlorine bleach added to a liter of water, really mist the surface down, let it sit for a minute, wipe it up, put it into a bag, throw it in the garbage, wash your hands afterwards. And to really protect yourself, we'd recommend wearing a mask when you're cleaning up any kind of rodent mess, feces. Mask, gloves, and if you have one available, N95 is the recommendation for the mask. So next, you really have to think about, you cleaned up the mess, you got rats, you try to figure out what is attracting the rats. And compost bin, as Sarah mentioned earlier, compost bins can provide food and shelter, and yeah, they're cozy places for a rat. So you're trying to think, if I were a rat, what would appeal to me? Compost bin, great. So what can you do with the compost bin? Rats, they're used to being prey. They're used to being preyed upon by other animals. So what you can do, you can move the compost bin away from a fence, away from other walls. Rats, other rodents, they usually like to stay along walls. It provides some kind of cover or fence lines. If you can move the compost bin away from the structure, that can help. You can get hardware cloth, put it underneath the bin and around the bin. This can help prevent rats from getting in. When you put food in there, cover it up. Avoid putting food like bread and pasta, meat, dairy, oils, all that stuff in there. Rats love all that stuff just like we do. And if none of that's working, consider using a drum composter if you still really want to be composting in your backyard. Then could also be something like, say you have bird feed, a bag of bird feed in your garage just sitting on the ground. That's really easy food for any kind of rodent. Are your garbage bins secure? Do you have a whole bunch of bird feeders that are overflowing? Or where's the water source? Like, where are the rats getting their water? You're trying to really figure out in your yard what's attracting the rats. Next, please. The other thing, you want to remove clutter. keep a neat and tidy looking yard, remove piles of brush and yard waste, or remove construction materials if you just had a project done. Keep piles of firewood off of the ground, and just keep in mind, rats, they usually want to stay close to cover of walls and fences, so be particularly mindful of those areas to remove clutter from those. Next, what you want to do is you want to walk around your house or your business, and you want to look for any kind of hole, any kind of holes in the foundation, or any kind of gap underneath a door that could permit rat or a mouse to run in. So rats can fit in a pretty tight area. They can fit in a hole about a quarter in diameter's size. Mice can fit into holes as small as a dime. So recommend go around. You're just looking for possible ways that a mouse or a rat could get into your house. And a very effective, very cheap way to keep them out is to use steel wool and just kind of jam it in those holes. If you want to use steel wool with some caulking, that could help it stay in there. So you want to do that all around. Look for any kind of pipes going into your house. Even if it's a really small little gap, you want to fill it in with steel wool. I guess, and after you've gone around, you've done the outside of your house, now it's a good time to go inside. And especially if you're concerned with rats, they would typically come in through the basement, through digging down, or they could come in on the main level. So you want to be looking around, is there any possible spot that a rat could come in here? And you want to take the steel wool and fill those gaps. Next, please. And then finally, so snap traps can be very effective, especially along walls. And it's recommended that you put them out only at night. The bad thing with snap traps is that if you put them out in the day, they can catch birds, they can catch chipmunks, other animals that you don't want it to catch. So if you're going to put one outside, just evening only, and but it's great for something like a garage. You shouldn't have a whole bunch of other animals running in there. There's traps like glue traps. They can very inhumane, so not recommended. And when it comes to poison, we just have to treat that as a last resort. One, rats can develop immunity to poison, and the rat eats the poison, it kills the rat, and then something else comes down and eats the rat, whether it be an owl or a hawk, and then it can also kill that animal. So there tends to be collateral damage when using poison. And just if you think about it, how much rat poison there is and how much rat poison people try to use, if that was the solution, there would not be 7 billion rats. There's roughly 7 billion rats in the world, all over the place. So we really have to stick with those annoying 4 things that are not the easiest things to do, but trying to figure out what's attracting them to your property, removing those things and blocking them from entering your house. There's a lot of pest control companies in and around Peterborough, and we recommend that you reach out to a professional. They can always come to your house. They'll do everything that we just talked about here. Try to identify what's attracting them, what's letting them in. So the role of Peterborough Public Health. It really depends on the setting where there is a rodent issue. If the rodent issue is linked to a food premise, it's very easy for us to look at that and say there's a real potential public health threat here. We also have a regulation that we can enforce, the food premises regulation. Say we went into a food premise and we saw there's a serious issue, nothing's being done to control the rat issue, we're actually concerned that the food is getting contaminated, we can do an immediate closure under the Health Protection and Promotion Act if it's severe. So we do have legal methods to deal with rats very easily for the most part in food premises. It's not so easy when it comes to private residences. So if a rodent issue is linked to a private residence, say it's a homeowner, and they're concerned they saw a rat, our primary role there is to provide education to that homeowner. If the rodent issue is linked to a rental unit, we work with the tenant. We often, first thing is tell the tenant to reach out to the landlord. That's the first thing they have to do. We give the tenant some practical advice about what they can do to minimize the issue. Ultimately, if the landlord is not addressing the issue, we can get in there, we can try to force them. But really, it's the city of Peterborough. They have bylaws that do speak specifically to this, and we can work with the city of Peterborough to help get it done, as the property standard bylaws and the property maintenance bylaws specifically speak to rodents. So we really do have to look, like, is the situation posing a public health threat? And I know that for a lot of people, seeing a rat is very mentally distressing. But in most instances, rats are not likely to negatively impact your health. They are part of the natural environment now. They're everywhere. That's not to say that you should be inviting them into your restaurant or business or your property, because if they do get in, they can cause a lot of damage, whether it be contaminating your food supply, chewing concrete, metal, chewing through wires. So really do need to take it seriously. It all comes back to this effective control. The more of these prevention methods you can do, the better. So yeah, you want to safely clean up using the wet method, wear gloves and a mask, remove clutter, food and water sources, do everything you can to block them out, contact licensed pest control, and that's likely to help your situation out. Okay, and now we'll get into the questions. Okay, so I will take the first one. What can Peterborough Public Health do about rats, roaches, and bed bugs in apartments? So for the most part, it would come down to education would be our typical role, especially for cockroaches and bed bugs in an apartment setting. We can work with the tenant, we can speak with the landlord, but when it comes to ordering things to be done, in many instances, it'll be easier to go through the city. The city does have a complaint form on their website, and there are 2 bylaws within the city of Peterborough that specifically speak to this. If it were something like a rat issue that the landlord is not willing to work on, we would become involved and we would work with our friends at the city. Question number 2, I don't know, Sarah, if you could take this one. I'll just read the question out. We have rats in our compost and they try to come into the house, but we feel that keeping food out of landfills, reducing greenhouse gas emissions is important. How much of the rat problem is due to backyard compost? Do you expect the situation will improve once we have the green bin program in place in the fall?
Yeah, I touched off it a little bit, but yeah, I mean, they definitely do eat compost, right? I don't think it's a big problem, but there are ways of controlling it. Like Matt was talking about, like I have chicken wire under mine, my composter, it's buried down. There's no way for them to, I have chicken wire, then rocks, and then my composter. You can also get like the raised ones that, have the twisters. There's also the Green Up has some ones that have no access at all. Like we got that kind. And so those, you really can use those and eliminate the problem. I do think that the green bin problem or the green bin program will actually help because, some people compost, to assist with their gardening, but other people like myself and the person who asked the question, we do it trying to, just better for the world. And so, being able to have my compost removed from my property on a weekly basis is going to be amazing. And again, it's going to be it's a better way of storing food waste than garbage bags, right? If people are concerned about having their compost sitting out there for a week or whatnot, you know, if you have the space in your freezer, that's what we do with our bones and stuff. We just put it in a plastic bag and then freeze it for the week, and then we just, you know, put that at the end of the week. So you can remove that issue as well. But generally, I don't think it's causes the problem. It definitely, you know, does feed rats, but there are ways to mitigate those risks. And I do think that the green bin program is going to be amazing. So I'm pretty, yeah. And when I told my students in urban ecology about it, there was literally a whoop, like everybody was so excited to hear it because they realized what a big step it is for the city. So yeah, I think it'll help.
Thanks, Sarah. And I'll take the next question. And I believe this was coming from somebody renting an apartment. They made their comment was they killed 5 large rats now that have come under their kitchen sink. One made it into the main living space. We try to keep things clean and tidy. Today I saw one outside that went into our rain drain pipe. Could the rats living here be causing some of our health problems? And I wouldn't want to speculate on what could be causing your health problems, but I would strongly recommend, if you haven't already, immediately reach out to your landlord. If there's ongoing health problems that are unexplained, reach out to your doctor. And also, if this is a situation that you've been trying to fix with your landlord, let us know. We can try to help you out. Ultimately, I would recommend as well going to the city's website, the property standards. They do have a complaint form, and you can put in a complaint with the city. We could assist with that as well. So yeah, call if you wanted to get pointed in the right direction. 705-743-1000. What can be done about people deliberately feeding rats in their backyard? And this is another one where we'll try to educate. Really, this is something people don't like to have, these uncomfortable conversations with their neighbors. But it's going to be much better if you have that uncomfortable conversation than if somebody from the city ends up being the first person to bring it to their attention, or somebody from the health unit. They're probably going to figure out, even though we're careful not to say anything, who made the complaint. So speak with your neighbors about this kind of thing. If the neighbor is just totally unwilling to stop feeding and they're attracting rats to the area, I would recommend that you put in, again, with the City of Peterborough, a complaint, property standards complaint. Our primary role there is education.
Right. So there are no questions on the YouTube feed. So I think that concludes our evening. Thank you to Dr. Jamieson and Matt Faris, who have joined us tonight. Really appreciate your wisdom with respect to this topic. And as I mentioned before, the recording will be on our YouTube page. It will also be on peterboroughpublichealth.ca/rats, probably within the next few days. So please go there if you want to find that. And Matt also provided some contact information if you wanted to chat further about anything he mentioned tonight. Thank you all so much. Have a good evening.
Thanks.
Thank you.